Alrighty, gang. Here's to nights that turn into mornings and friends that turn into family. Cheers!
Happy birthday to you.
Hello. Welcome to the Friendship IRL podcast. I'm your host, Alex Alexander, and each week we explore what's working and what's not in our friendships, community, and connections. Have you ever wished you could sit down and have a conversation about what is really going on in your friendships? Well, you found your people. Join us as we dive into real-life stories and explore new ways to approach these connections. Together, we're reimagining the rules of friendship. You know that friend? The one that sometimes pops in your mind at 2 a.m. and you think, what if we hadn't lost touch? Or maybe you're like me. Maybe there are places you go, right? You drive past an apartment they used to live in, or you see the car they used to drive. Maybe you are going to lunch somewhere you used to always go with that friend that you lost touch with. And suddenly, these memories come flooding back. And you just think to yourself, what would it be like if we were still talking? Or what would it be like if they were here? Why did we lose touch? Or maybe it really stings. Maybe it hurts really, really bad. We've talked about friendship breakups like that before. Go back and listen to episode 25. I've talked about this idea before that no matter what, as much as we like to think that our friendships are done, that they end at a certain point, it's not really the case. If we use my roots of friendship metaphor, in fact, I think that no matter what, if you think of your friendship as a plant in a pot, if you pull that plant out, some roots still get left in there. And that's kind of how I feel about a friendship that got away. There's still those lingering memories and moments, places, people that bring back thoughts of them. And I think that's completely normal. As much as the dialogue out there is kind of like, oh, well, the friendship is done. We all know that's not the case. We all know that those thoughts linger. Now, the past couple of weeks, I've been talking about the thoughts we have in relation to our friendships. So 2 weeks ago, I talked about the thoughts that I have, that you have, related to myself as a friend. Sometimes they're nice thoughts, but in that episode, I specifically talked about what I call the friendship guilt spiral, where sometimes I say really mean stuff about myself. And I know a lot of us do that, right? We think about what we should have done or what we should have said or how we're a bad friend. But if we had done X instead of Y, that's what a good friend would do. And now once we start having those negative thoughts, it is very, very easy for them to spiral and get all-consuming. And then it's harder to take action. Last week, I talked some more about negative thoughts we have about our friends. Specifically, the negative thoughts we have, not about ourselves, but about our friends. Like, I hope you're having nice thoughts, that you're grateful and you love them. But I talked about the universal feeling that sometimes they just drive us a little crazy, right? That every friendship has its pet peeves, has those things that we say in our head like, oh, I can't believe they're doing that again. And it just grates on our nerves. Which brings me to this week. This week, we're talking about the friend who got away, the regrets we have, maybe the reality checks about the state of this friendship, and why some friendships just seem to haunt us. Those thoughts, we just can't shake them, maybe even years later. Now, I think that there are a variety of types of friends who got away. I think a really common one is kind of that friendship where it was just a slow fade. There wasn't any big fight, no drama, no blow up. I think the friendship can fade for a few reasons. Now, one might just be that a lot of things have shifted in your friendships and a lot of your roots have changed, your connection points. But it could also just be that a lot of people aren't very good at kind of that friendship admin, at being consistent about reaching out and checking in. It's really easy for life to just get in the way, right? We're busy. And then you add, the more adultier of an adult you become, the more you add, the more responsibilities you have. And suddenly, between taking care of maybe a partner or a family, some pets, work responsibilities, medical issues, caregiving for other people in your life, as that adds on and you have more and more and more of those, it's just life. And slowly, somebody you might have talked to daily, weekly, at least regularly, you realize it's been maybe some years. Now, this is always the point where I say, like, you can just reach out. I have done it. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But if you feel the call to, I would say do it. What's the harm? The friendship's already faded. You might be able to reinvigorate it, but that's a choice, right? You might also just be like, it's okay, we've moved on. That's fine too. Another type of friend who got away is that friend where you had a misunderstanding. Something was said or done. It created a rift in the friendship. And instead of facing it head on, nobody brought up that conversation, or maybe you tried to have that conversation and it did not go well. That culture of conflict that I mentioned in last week's episode, that was not there in this friendship. And it was just too much. But you can look back and you can kind of pinpoint what happened. Or maybe, I've had a friendship like this where I know there was a riff, but I actually don't know what it was. I can't get an answer. I've asked many a time, believe me. And that one, man, dagger to the heart. It's a hard one. I see you if that's happened to you. Another type of friend who got away is kind of that different life paths friend. Now, I talk a lot about this in my Roots of Friendship episodes. This idea that when life paths change, you have to build new roots. You have to build new ways you stay connected, ways you spend time together, things you talk about. So one place I've talked about this a lot is in regards to friends of mine who have had kids when I currently don't have any kids. It's been a lot of work for us to figure out new ways to spend time together, to make sure we're staying engaged enough in each other's lives that we're asking important questions, good questions, even though we aren't having the same experiences every day. I think we're having to navigate, something I know I'm having to navigate is building ways I hang out with friends, right? Roots, shared experience roots, where it also balances out my time to, say, hang out with my friend who is a mom alone, but also this balance of hanging out with her and her kids, right? The dynamics are different, just the way it's different if I hang out with her and her spouse. And navigating all that as you're listening to it, like that is work. And some people that just doesn't happen or it doesn't go very smoothly. And as soon as it's bumpy, you don't push through. And it's very easy for a friendship like that to feel like a friend who got away. Now, the last type of friend who got away, I'm sure there are more types, but the one I'm going to mention is the meant to reach out but never did friend. You might be like, well, that kind of sounds like the slow fade friend. But in my mind, this is actually somebody that you might still see regularly. Like you might have been really, really good friends previously, maybe a decade ago, a few years ago, whatever. And you were kind of that slow fade friend. And now you still see each other. So maybe you're members of the same community. You live in the same area that you grow up in. You moved away, you came back, you see each other all the time. You used to be amazing friends. But a lot of your roots, the ways you spend time together, the things you know about each other, and your present life, all of that's kind of faded away. And so maybe you see each other at community events. You see each other at the grocery store. You see each other at your, some sort of local school concert. And you say hi. And it's always this yeah, we really should both get together and catch up. And in the moment, you both sound like you really do want to do this. But what I think happens here is the overwhelm of actually having to do the work to rebuild like a new, fresh connection is almost too much for people. So even though it's enticing, maybe it's intriguing to consider building a new version of this friendship, you're like, just never happens. Never happens. Now, the thing about all of these is for their own reasons, they might haunt us a little bit. Or if you don't like the word haunt, maybe it's not a bad thing. They might stick with you. They might linger. And I think that, there's a lot of stuff going on here. Like one thing to point out is when those friendships fade away, there can be a lot of nostalgia for the previous version of the friendship. There can be nostalgia when I'm driving in my car and see the car of a friend that I used to be really close with. And I wish I could go back to the time when we were 22 and we had that version of our friendship. Now, let's say, just for the sake of this example, that this is a kind of meant to reach out but never did friend. I see this car. It's not my friend's car anymore, but I see the car out and about. I actually saw a friend's car yesterday. I saw a gold Ford Ranger. And it brought me back. I recorded it on my phone, actually, because I was like, wow, it even has a dent. Like, I wonder if that's her car. Now, this is not a friend I've lost touch with, but it brought me back. But let's say it is a friend that is kind of that meant to reach out but never did. Someone I run into at the grocery store all the time, whatnot. I think some of the reason that this can really linger with us is we have so much nostalgia. And that might be what even we talk about at the grocery store. Like, hey, I saw so-and-so. Do you remember that time that we drove around all night blaring music? Just the three of us in the car, right? That is beautiful and wonderful. And I love when we all have that history. But then it can be hard to separate the reality of like, wow, we don't have an actual connection in our present lives. Like, I don't really know anything about them. I don't know where they live now or their partner or their kids or any of the things like that. Now, you could build that connection, but it's not currently there like it once was. And that sticks with us because you're like, why didn't we keep that friendship alive? That might be what you say to yourself. Or you might be like, wow, I'm so happy I moved on from that friendship. It's really not good for me. Whatever it is, all I'm trying to say here is to let it be. Like, take the action if you want to, and if not, don't give yourself any labels. It's just like so natural for friendships to go through these ebbs and flows and ups and downs and changes. It's okay to just run into someone at the grocery store, have 5 minutes of nostalgia, appreciate what your friendship once was, and say, wow, I really love that I had that when I was in my young 20s, and then just move on. That's okay. Because I think a lot of times when we have maybe these regrets, that kind of connects back to the friendship guilt episode I did. Because of so much of that, like when these friendships go, pay attention to your inner thoughts. There's a very strong message out there, that you're like a better friend. I'm doing air quotes right now. You're a better friend if you can keep friends for a long time. I think in recent years, we're seeing more and more messaging reminding us that that's okay. We can make new friends for our current life. But sometimes those beliefs are buried deep in our subconscious. And if that's the case, are you guilting yourself, thinking like, well, I'm a bad friend because I couldn't keep that friendship alive? Let that go. The only thing that matters is that you have friendships that feel supportive to you in your current phase of life. It is okay if other friendships faded away. And it is also okay if you put in the work and rebuild a new version of that old friendship. Because so much of friendship is about timing. It's about building these roots that support the current version of ourselves, that we can connect in ways that don't feel like, oh, wow, I'm having to pretend I'm the 22-year-old version of myself when I hang out with this friend. That gets exhausting. That was beautiful then, but that is not what you need now. So let the timing feel natural. Something I get asked all the time is, how do I know when to keep trying in a friendship versus when to let go? And this is so hard because it's so specific to every single friendship. that I don't even know how to give a blanket answer, but I guess what I would tell you is that it's a feeling. And that feeling is kind of two parts. The first part is, do you want to do the work? If you do the work, do you see a version of this friendship that feels positive in your life in its current iteration? Could you get there? Not just because you should, because you've been friends forever, because you're in the same season of life, whatever the reason is. Forget the shoulds. Do you think it can get there? Number one. And number two, do you think they want to put in the work? Has there been any indication? And sometimes it's worth just putting it out there, like actually putting in a little bit of effort. But if it's not reciprocated, that's okay. Let it go. Because at the end of the day, whether you reinvigorate an old friendship or build a new friendship, it's all effort and energy and emotional labor. And you can direct that wherever feels most aligned to you. Now, the other place you're going to have to direct effort and energy is in kind of that mourning period, right? There's a grieving period to letting friendships go and finding some peace with the fact that that friendship is not in your life anymore. It is in a totally different version than it once was. It feels different now. Whatever new state this friendship is in, like, allow yourself the time to feel sad. That's okay. And while you go through that period, or maybe more towards the end, it's up to you. I like to say that every past friendship taught us something, whether it's about ourselves, about the world, about who we want to be, about what's possible. There's so many lessons you could learn from a friendship. So even if it ended, it's not a failure. It wasn't a waste of your time. It wasn't not worth your energy. Like, look for what you can take with you into your future friendships and really hold on to that, because you did learn something, and that is going to be worthwhile in the community that you are creating and investing in. Now, I just want to close this episode by saying that if you have experienced any sort of friendship, loss, ending, grief, breakup, that crap is hard. It is hard. And we don't give enough grace to people going through that. You know, you can say you're having a romantic breakup. People understand that you're hunkered down at home, deep in your grief. If you have a friend breakup, I just don't think it's treated the same way. And sometimes I actually think we might have had our friends for way longer or been connected in way more ways. So just take care of yourself if that's you. I'm sending you love. With that, I'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Friendship IRL. I am so honored to have these conversations with you, but don't let the chat die here. Send me a voice message. I created a special website just to chat with you. You can find it at alex.chat. You can also find me on Instagram. My handle @itsAlexAlexander, or go ahead and leave a review wherever you prefer to listen to podcasts. Now, if you want to take this conversation a step further, send this episode to a friend. Tell them you found it interesting, and use what we just talked about as a conversation starter the next time you and your friend hang out. No need for a teary goodbye. I'll be back with a new episode next week.